Okay, and you are live.
Okay, welcome everyone to our November CSAC meeting. I am calling the meeting to order. Oh, I hear some feedback. Do you have any public comment on items not on the agenda? Would Marja or Nick know that?
We did not receive any.
Okay. Our next item would be the approval of the October meeting minutes.
I sent Marja a few typos.
I did too.
I'm sorry I sent them so late.
I said I got Steve's. I didn't get any. Who sent them?
I sent you some. There were just a few.
Is it D or Elizabeth saying that? I can't
D.
tell who's speaking. D? You want to try resending it to me and I can make your edits, and then if everybody's okay, if they're just grammar, I can make changes.
Right now?
I'll make them as soon as I get them, and then if they're just as long as there are not any changes to the content of the minutes itself, as far as the discussion, grammatical stuff.
No, they were just typos.
That's
Can someone want to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes, knowing that there's some typos?
I'll move to approve.
A second.
Okay, all in favor, raise your hand. Anyone opposed? Meeting minutes are approved. So tonight we have a
I'm
guest
sorry,
speaker. Oh, who? The motion
who
came
motioned
from.
and who seconded?
I second. I was
Tom?
second.
Yeah, who motioned?
Tom. Tom
Oh,
Stewart.
okay. Okay, got it.
Okay, so we have a special guest tonight, Tom Hershey. Maybe you could introduce yourself, what you do at the city, and we look forward to your presentation.
Sure. Thank you, commission members, and have a good evening, and thanks for having me. I'm going to go ahead and start showing my slides here, and hopefully we'll get it to work properly. Nick, give me a head nod if it's up correctly. We good?
We see your email.
Oh, sorry about that. How about that?
Looks lovely.
Fantastic, fantastic. Again, hello, my name's Tom Hershey. I'm the Emergency Management Coordinator / Law Enforcement Planner for the City of Dublin. I've been in this position for 10 years now. Prior to that, I was actually a police lieutenant here in Dublin and served on the Dublin Police Force for 16 years. And prior to that, I worked in a small town up north called Willard, Ohio, where I was a police officer up there for 6 years. So combined, I'm close to about 32 years of law enforcement experience and public safety experience. I've been asked tonight to talk to you about emergency management, what it is, and how the city interprets emergency management. So I'm going to kind of go through some slides and talk to you. I'm very informal, so at any point that you have a question, feel free to holler or wave at Nick and he can stop me, and we'll do the best we can to answer any questions that you might have. I'll start first off. Emergency management with the City of Dublin is actually identified in the Code of Ordinances. There's a specific chapter in the city code that deals with emergency management. We call it Chapter 36. It details basically what the city's responsibilities are and what the city manager's responsibilities are when dealing with any type of an emergency. The main areas covered in the code deal with appointment and the organization in the city, the powers and duties that are granted to the city manager, as well as the development and maintenance of a local emergency operations plan so that we can prepare for any type of emergency that happens. And as I'm talking here, I'm going to probably throw in different terminologies that are going to mean the same for purposes of this presentation. So if I use the word emergency, disaster, critical incident, for purposes of this presentation, we're considering all those things kind of the same thing. So one of the first steps that we deal with when preparing for emergencies is identifying what it is that's likely to occur or likely to have a significant impact in the city of Dublin. Thankfully, where we're located, there are a lot of hazards that we don't have to prepare for per se. For example, we're not a coastal community, so hurricanes, tsunami, tropical storms generally don't impact Ohio, although they do have some cursory impact with winds sometimes occurring. We're not located in large land masses that have forests, so wildfires, landslides, things of those nature generally don't happen in the city of Dublin either. So how we go about detailing our risk assessment hazard analysis is kind of a combination of factors. We look at those things that have occurred in Dublin in the past. So we look at the history of events that have occurred in Dublin. We poll our management and supervisors throughout the city to identify what it is they think is most likely to occur or most likely to have a major impact in Dublin. And last but not least, in late 2017, early 2018, we actually surveyed about 200 Dublin residents in conjunction with the Franklin County Emergency Management Association to get their input as to what they think are those hazards that the city of Dublin should most prepare for, or what they thought is most likely to happen in Dublin. So when you see on your left-hand side, you see those things that are identified by the Dublin residents, Dublin supervisors, and historical means of those things that are the most likely to happen in Dublin. You'll notice that I didn't number them. And the reason being is that historically, and by the information that we received from both supervisors and residents, those numbers really can't differentiate between 1, 2, and 7 and 9. We feel like all of these hazards are things that potentially could happen in Dublin. Some are obviously more likely than others. On the right-hand side is the Franklin County EMA, or Emergency Management Agency, and what they prepare for in regards to their hazard analysis. You'll see that they're not in the same order per se, but you'll notice that a lot of the things that are on the left-hand side are also represented on the right-hand side. So if you look at Dublin, we're talking about utility or energy interruption or failure. That's a power loss. We've had that in Dublin, sometimes as long as 5, 6, 7 days. Severe winter weather event, blizzards, cyber threats, tornado events, severe summer weather event. That can be anything from a lightning storm to high winds, air and water pollution, invasive species, drought, a hazardous materials incident with I-270 and US Route 33 both flowing through Dublin. Those are two major causeways that are used to transport hazardous type materials. Infectious disease, which is something prior to this year most people didn't pay much attention to. It certainly is in the forefront of everybody's minds right now. A lone wolf terrorist event. The CBRNE, that stands for chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and explosive terrorist incident. And then flooding. So as we go through that and we kind of put that information together between the city code and identifying what those things are that we should most prepare for, we then embark upon what we call a comprehensive emergency management system. Part of that system is an implementation of 4 phases. The first phase is a phase that we call mitigation, which is basically trying to prevent or reduce that hazard if in fact it occurs in Dublin. The way comprehensive emergency management works in Dublin is that although I'm the emergency management coordinator, emergency management isn't my sole responsibility. My job is to help coordinate it. Emergency management is the responsibility of every single division and department within the city. And you'll hear me later, it also expands outside of that to both businesses, nonprofit organizations, social groups, as well as families and individuals. But when we talk about this first phase of mitigation, these are things simply as building codes, fire prevention, community planning, zoning codes, and public education. So I'm going to bounce back one slide real quick to show you. You see flooding is towards the bottom. Flooding is actually the most encountered event in Ohio in regards to emergencies, disasters, and things of that nature. But the way that the community was planned is that we, for the most part, have not developed along the river or creeks close enough where we get flooding that causes long-term or repetitive structure damage in Dublin. So through mitigation, we've been able to reduce the likelihood of a flooding event causing much damage in the city. The second phase that we go into is a phase called preparedness. This is basically those actions taken in preparation for or in advance of an emergency so that we're better able to facilitate a response to that emergency. Examples include the emergency operations plan itself, the tornado sirens that we have in Dublin, the lightning prediction systems that we have in our major parks in Dublin, Smart 911, which is a tool that residents can sign up for to be alerted to emergencies, disasters, severe weather in the city of Dublin, as well as mutual aid agreements that we have with other cities and other counties and in the state itself in regards to support. On the right-hand side of the slide are some preparedness resources that are available to people that I talked about earlier. The top one is Smart 911. You can sign up for that, and that's a tool that allows the City of Dublin and the Dublin Police Department to push information out to you in regards to emergencies that might be happening. It also gives you the opportunity to provide information so that if the police or the fire or EMS have to come to your residence, that they have certain information in advance that you want them to have. So for example, if you were taking care of an elderly relative or had a family member with special needs, that would give you an opportunity to put information in to give us some advance notice. So if and when we have to come to your residence, we're able to do so and respond in the most effective manner. The second one is Alert Franklin County. That is a system that the Franklin County EMA also has that puts out information in regards to special events that are occurring in the area, as well as weather, things of that nature. Then there's the nextdoor.com. That is a social media platform set up for neighborhoods where they can share all kinds of information. It doesn't have to be about crime or emergencies. It can be about anything. And last but not least is Twitter. If you're a social media user from that standpoint, is the Dublin Police have its own Twitter site, and we're able to push information out almost in real time in regards to hazardous things that are occurring in and around the Dublin area. Are there any questions so far? We good? Okay, I'll move on. Phase 3 is the response phase. This is when something bad happens, what's going to take place. In Dublin, obviously, we have law enforcement with Washington Township Fire Department. We have fire and rescue and emergency medical. We have evacuation plans and shelter-in-place plans in place. We have emergency sheltering and public information to help people respond to incidents as they occur. And the last phase is what we call the recovery phase, and that is any type of short-term, and it can be also long-term activity designed to get Dublin back to where it was in its normal state, or maybe even in an improved state, an advanced state. And the examples of the things that we do in regards to that are damage assessment, debris management. So for example, if we have bad storms in Dublin, we encourage residents to move branches and things like that to the side of the road, and we'll run our chipper services up and down streets in order to get rid of that type of thing. Decontamination, disaster assistance, and temporary housing are things that we're also capable of providing as part of mutual aid if and when we need those type of events.
Hey, Tom.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was on mute. I did have a question about preparedness.
Sure.
So like with COVID-19 being an infectious disease, were there actually operation plans that were already written where, when we realized, that this was a serious event, there was plans that people could execute, or was it like developed on the fly?
No, we started our original planning in 2009 for any type of pandemic event back during the H1N1 series of things. We updated that plan in 2011, and we're updating that plan now. So we had a plan in place in regards to how the city was going to respond to a traumatic pandemic event. Everything ranging from how we're going to, if we're going to remote work certain personnel, to cleaning and disinfecting, to the use of masks, to the use of alternative schedules, vehicles, things of that nature. And those plans are in cooperation with both the county and the state also had pandemic plans in place.
Okay.
So along those lines, when we deal with response and recovery priorities, is that if and when a major event happens in Dublin, we identify specific priorities as to how public safety and public services are going to be provided. First and foremost, saving lives. The second is going to be first responder safety. Second being third being incident stabilization or stabilizing what's happening. And fourth but not least is the property and environmental preservation. So those are the priorities that we will operate under. So if we're in the middle of an active event and somebody calls in needing help because a family member is trapped in their home and somebody else calls because there are branches in the roadway, we're going to respond to the people that are in need of help first. And we're going to prioritize those calls. We'll get to everything, but in a priority that kind of falls in line with the 4 priorities I have in front of you right now. We also, as part of our planning, identify what we call essential facilities and essential systems in the city. I'm going to give you some examples here, but these are things that we're going to work on to try to restore as quickly as possible in the event that some type of critical incident impacts them. So for example, facilities. The Dublin Justice Center is one of the major facilities that we're going to try to restore first and foremost. The reason being is this is also where our 911 center is located, as well as our emergency operations center and the police department itself. So 3 critical functions that need to be operating during a critical incident emergency are housed in this particular environment. So this is kind of on the top of our list. We then use Washington Township fire stations, hospitals, schools, and major infrastructure are examples of other facilities that we're going to look to restore as quickly as possible. Along those lines, in parallel, we also have systems in place that we're trying to work with. In Ohio, a lot of these systems, but not all of them, are privately operated. So we work in cooperation with those private vendors in trying to restore those systems. Electricity being one. Water and sewer, we contract with the city of Columbus. Communication systems deal with everything from cable television to satellite to telephone and cell phone type systems. And last but not least, gas type systems as well. So these are the systems and facilities that we're looking at to try to restore as quickly as possible, because these are going to help us in the long run respond most effectively to the emergency or disaster that's happening in Dublin. The emergency operations plan itself is designed as an all-hazard plan. So we don't necessarily develop specific plans to specific emergencies. So we don't have a specific tornado plan or a specific blizzard plan or a specific hazardous materials plan. We develop an all-hazard plan that allows us to respond to just about any type of natural, man-made, or technological event occurring in Dublin. This plan's reviewed on an annual basis between myself, several of the city leaders, Washington Township Fire Department, as well as the city manager himself. And we look at this plan to determine whether or not we need to amend, change anything, lessons learned, things that we can do better. This emergency operations plan utilizes what they call an integrated emergency management system. That means it utilizes 3 federal components that have kind of been mandated on both state, county, and local government to use in emergencies. One is the incident command system, one is the national incident management system, and the last is the national response framework. How many of you are familiar with any of those? Probably not. What I'll do here is, that way I don't butcher it, I'm going to read to you just a brief description that we have for those that actually comes out of our plan. The incident command system is what we call an organizational structure. It develops in a top-down modular fashion based on the size and complexity of the incident. So if we have a car crash with a leaking truck, we might have a police sergeant on scene with a fire commander working in conjunction with a couple police cars and a couple fire trucks. Or if we had a major tornado event, we may have the chief of police on scene directing dozens of police officers and dozens of firefighters in a response. So it's kind of a modular, best fit type management structure. The NIMS, or National Incident Management System, is kind of a system that's based on interoperability, communications, as well as the incident command system that I just talked about. NIMS talks about making sure that we have, when we're talking on the police radio, making sure that we're using plain language. If you watch TV shows, you hear police officers, 10-4, code 33, code 32. The problem with all that is not all police departments utilize those same languages. So if we call on mutual aid and have 6 different police departments come and they have 6 different codes that they talk in, no one can understand one another. NIMS mandates that when we're on a police call, that instead of saying I'm on a code 4, which means injury accident, we would simply say I'm out on an injury accident. So that's a component of NIMS that works with police, fire, emergency management services, things of that nature. And then the National Response Framework is basically a framework that allows local agencies to work with state, county, federal agencies, private partners, non-private partners, nonprofit, social organizations, things of that nature. So they all kind of come together to help form this integrated management system. So when we're dealing with the emergency operations plan, there are major components to it. It's a rather lengthy document. It's probably close to 100 pages in length. So here are kind of the major components that make up this plan. The emergency authority powers and duties. As part of that plan, the city manager is designated as the emergency management director for the city of Dublin. And he is granted certain powers with that allow him to do things in the case of an emergency. So for example, on March 17th, I believe it was the exact date, our city manager declared a state of emergency here in 2020 for the city of Dublin when the pandemic was taking place. Part of the reason for doing that was to make us available both for state and federal recovery funding if and when it became available. So in that instance, it was more of a paper exercise, but it was very, very important because it ensures that if dollars become available, those dollars can be reimbursed back to the city of Dublin. Another example goes back a ways, but back on 9/11 when that occurred. In the city of Dublin, if you were around back then, the local gas stations, not all of them, but a number of them along West Bridge Street started jacking up their gas prices to $5, $6 a gallon. At that time, the city manager, the emergency management director, put out a regulation to the gas stations to inform them that they could not raise the gas price above $1.50 per gallon. And basically that forced them to bring those costs back down. I always tease the city manager that we should turn that regulation back on today because $1.50 would be nice to fill up a gas tank. The 4 phases of comprehensive emergency management, we've talked about that already. Mutual aid and resource acquisition. In the city of Dublin, we have a number of mutual aid agreements, both with police departments as well as fire departments, as well as public service departments with a number of communities throughout Central Ohio. In addition to that, the state of Ohio, back around the mid-2000s, passed what they called the IMAC, or the Intra-State Mutual Aid Compact. And what that allows is that anytime that a disaster takes place, any corporation within the state of Ohio, municipal, county, and state, can provide resources to any other corporation, meaning municipal, county, village, state within Ohio. So if something major were to happen in Dublin and we needed a resource and that resource was only available out of Cleveland, Ohio, IMAC would allow Cleveland, Ohio to send both that resource and personnel down to the city of Dublin if they were capable of doing so. The plan identifies organizational assignments and responsibilities as well as department and division responsibilities. Who is going to be responsible for doing what? Intergovernment assistance, we kind of talked about that already. We identify roles for both private and nonprofit organizational roles, as in what can they do to assist Dublin in the event that an emergency happens. We have both direction, control, and coordination of critical incident directions that we have. Restoration of community lifelines and public services. Those were those facilities and systems that I talked about. We also have a section in there dealing with continuity of government, that gosh forbid something were to happen that the city manager is incapacitated, who would take over at that point in time? And we have that for every single division and department within the city, where we go at least 3 deep in regards to a continuity of government, people who are capable of taking on the role in the event if someone above them are incapacitated or unavailable. Training and equipment's identified both in the plan, as well as financial information, as well as plan administration, development, and maintenance. Those are kind of the main sections of the plan as we go through. Now, there are also appendices to the plan. Now, I talked about earlier that in general, we don't have specific plans dealing with specific events, but you'll notice here that you'll see the pandemic plan. In 2009, what we determined when dealing with the preparations for H1N1 were that the background and information dealing with a pandemic or a public health crisis are so unique and so different than an all-hazard type event that we traditionally prepare for, that we felt the need to create an independent appendix to that, which is a plan that, again, we've had in place since 2009. Also in there are the local emergency support functions. Those are 15 functions identified by the state of Ohio that they would want any community to be able to deal with. Things simply as law enforcement, public affairs, firefighting, search and rescue, public health, things of that nature. Our threat assessment and hazard analysis that I talked about earlier is listed in that plan, as well as the Emergency Operations Center. And there's a picture of it located there. That is in the bottom basement area of the Dublin Justice Center. That is a location where 16 department leaders, and it could be smaller than that, but generally 16 is as big as we go, would meet in person and help direct an event in the event a major crisis were to take place. Now, the uniqueness of this is that, and I'll talk about this in a little bit with the pandemic, is that under traditional type events that occur, you get together in the same physical location to work through the event. The uniqueness of the pandemic event is that you don't want to bring people physically together for the risk of getting them ill. So we developed what we call a virtual emergency operations center, and that is also included in our EOC plan. Now, each division and department in the city is encouraged to have their own emergency operations plan, and depending on what they do, some of them have a physical plan in of itself. Some have simply policy or procedures in their own type of work environment. So, for example, the Dublin Police Department has its own emergency operations plan that supplements the city's emergency operations plan. And it just kind of identifies the incident command function, who is going to be in charge if something were to happen, and a variety of other functions that you can see there. I don't need to read them to you, but those are examples of major functions that take place. Now, one of them that's included in the police department's plan and not in the city plan is the O'Shaughnessy Dam Emergency Action Plan. We've had some discussion over the years as to what's the best place to put that. Being that the O'Shaughnessy Dam is technically located outside of the city of Dublin, it would really only be the police department that would be responding up there if in the event that we got a call that something significant may be happening. We'd go up there, do a quick assessment, and they would activate our city emergency operations plan if we felt it was necessary. And I can answer questions about that now or later if you have any in regards to that particular plan. Training and exercise. Select employees throughout the city are identified to complete a number of federally mandated NIMS training, the National Incident Management System training, as well as the Incident Command System training. Those trainings occur online and in person, depending on the level of training that you're completing. In addition to that, the City of Dublin does a test or an exercise every single year to test our emergency operations plan. Now, when we say exercise, that can be something as simple as a seminar where we're sitting down with 25 or 30 city leaders and talking about it, to as large as an event with 90 people. And we did this last year, I think in 2019, where we had, I think, 93 people over at the Dublin Rec Center in the Talas observing a significant event taking place where we operated the Emergency Operations Center and would respond to it so that people could participate, see what's going on, things of that nature. We also participate in a number of events occurring both at the county and our partner level at local communities. So if Union County is having an exercise, they may invite us out to participate, observe, evaluate, things of that nature. And we also have the capability of sending employees and vehicles and equipment to other local governments in time of crisis. We've done that back in the early 90s when there were a number of storms and flooding in southern Ohio. We sent city vehicles and city personnel down there to help. We sent a contingent during 9/11 to New York City. We sent a contingent of about a dozen police officers to New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina to help with policing that community when that event took place. We also have a Dublin Emergency Preparedness webpage. So on the city's webpage, there's a section called Public Safety. If you click on that, you're going to see the police department, you'll see the fire department, but you'll also see something that says Emergency Preparedness. You click on that, and there are a number of things on that plan dealing for things that businesses can use, things that schools can use, but we also primarily gear it towards families and individuals, that things that they can use to prepare themselves to be not only ready for any type of critical incident, but to be more knowledgeable about them, such as what are the ones most likely to happen in Dublin, how often that they occur, what type of things that they are, and things that people can do to take place to get themselves ready for them. The pandemic. So, just to kind of give you an outline as to what took place with the pandemic, and again, I'm going to refer to some notes that I jotted down here, is that on January 22nd was the first time that I, as the emergency management coordinator, started tracking information going on in regards to this particular COVID-19 pandemic that was taking place in China and moving its way towards the United States. At that time, we advised the chief of police and the city manager as to what was taking place. And on January 24th, our city manager started putting out information to key staff to make them aware of what was happening in China and other countries and what potentially was starting to happen in the United States. Around February 27th, about 60 cases were identified in the United States, primarily along the northwest coast in the US, up in the Washington and Oregon areas. The governor started laying out plans statewide around March 3rd. Our city manager on March 3rd updated our senior staff as well as city council in regards to what the state was preparing to do, the background, as well as information about COVID-19. On and about around March 10th, the city manager, in conjunction with consulting Franklin County Public Health, which is our local public health partner, made the decision to start canceling events occurring in and around Dublin. The St. Patrick's Day Parade, the State of the City, as well as the pedestrian bridge opening. We started closing those events because we were seeing an uptick in regards to COVID-19 cases happening, and we were also adopting the state's direction of trying to push down the amount of infections taking place so that we did not overload or pass our surge capacity through our medical system. On March 17th, the city manager issued a declaration of disaster or emergency for the city of Dublin. Again, the primary reason behind that was to make sure that Dublin was available for both federal and state recovery resources, but it also allowed him internally to suspend certain collective bargaining agreements that were in place in order to ensure that we had the people staffed here in the city of Dublin that we needed in the event that this pandemic was going to become worse. On and about that time as well, he also suspended travel throughout the city for employees so that people weren't traveling unnecessarily. And he also started closing down city facilities and other city operations from the standpoint of COVID-19. So as that transpired, we started setting up on March 17th what we called the daily pandemic call. And what it was a virtual emergency operations center that involved a little over 40 city employees meeting on a daily basis to talk about things in regards to this pandemic event. And you'll see here through the bullet points is that we kind of identified an agenda very early on to deal with as we were dealing with this pandemic event. So emergency response priorities was one of the things that we talked about very early on. And again, I need to refer to my notes so that I identify them correctly. I apologize as I'm moving papers around here. So those priorities were protecting the public, protecting staff and ensuring their availability, continuity of government, providing essential services, ensuring the city's fiscal health, ensuring the city's economic vitality, conducting joint information center operations, and preparing for future operations. So that everything that we did kind of essentially was focused on those priorities as to how the city of Dublin was going to respond to this pandemic. From there, we would then go through this particular agenda item where we would review those priorities. We would discuss essential functions and assessing them in the city of Dublin. Everything from are parks open, are parks closed? Are we going to open a swimming pool? Are we going to allow people to rent particular spots at the rec center or pavilions? Things of that nature. Our Joint Information Center, again, was a daily intelligence and information review that was provided to the key city staff in regards to what was happening in the state of Ohio, what was happening at the county level, what was happening on the local level. We would then update everything from community, businesses, schools, social services, impacts on senior living facilities, internal, external messaging that was being monitored by our Communications and Public Information Division. Our finance update, employee health update, tracking who would have COVID here in the city, who we needed to put under quarantine, things of that nature. Human resource update in regards to our policies in responding to COVID. We would get an update from Washington Township, which is a major partner for us because they do provide both fire department and emergency medical services. Logistics, supplies, and inventories. You can imagine that we needed to go out and find masks for employees, gloves, gowns, face shields, things of that nature. And we wanted to also support Washington Township in their efforts to also obtain those items. Safety and risk management, both as a city internally and externally. Information technology update. This became something very, very, very important for us because we moved to this virtual platform that we're on now. So we needed to know how we could do that and what capabilities that we had to do that. And our IT folks were outstanding that, you know, after this happened, within probably 48 hours, we had everything that we needed to be fully functional from a virtual perspective. Any type of future operations planning, what were things that we were predicting to happen or going to happen down the road? Care and wellness, both inside the city as well as outside. Doing things for residents such as the drive-in movie theaters and things of that nature, try to provide for the wellness in the community. And any type of general roundtable that we might have from that regard. Dealing with the pandemic, did anybody get to see what the numbers look like today for the state of Ohio? 6,500 new cases. We broke the record by almost 1,200. Well over 300 hospitalizations. I believe we broke the state record for that as well. The governor himself called it alarming and is planning on having a press conference tomorrow, I believe at 5:30 p.m. that I'm sure all the local news channels are going to cover. So back to emergency management is that so far I've talked primarily that, you know, what we do from the city's perspective, but that's only one component of emergency management. There are a lot of components outside of it. So government, for you, you know, the city of Dublin, Franklin County, the state of Ohio are the three major government services in addition to Washington Township that you're going to deal with on a daily basis. But from the standpoint of private sector businesses, you deal with them too. You probably get your electricity from a private vendor, probably your gas from a private vendor, your cell phones, your cable, your satellite services from a private vendor. Sewer and water in this area, again, is contracted through the city of Columbus, so that's who provides that. We also deal with social services and nonprofit organizations. So for example, if a major event were to occur in Dublin and we needed to set up some type of temporary housing or shelter, the American Red Cross is basically identified as the group that comes in and sets that up and maintains that. So that is, again, a team effort from the standpoint of both private entities and public entities working together. We have a very close relationship with Dublin City Schools. We have close relationships with our churches. We work with the media to push messaging out that we want residents to know and other citizens in Central Ohio. We also feel it's very, very incumbent upon families and individuals to also play a very key role for emergency management. And the question is, what can you do? So up in the upper right-hand corner there, you see kind of three main things that we've been encouraging residents for 10 plus years to really kind of focus on for preparation. First and foremost is be informed. Know what's going on. In the city of Dublin, we're pretty lucky because if you're outside and a tornado warning is going to impact the city of Dublin, you're going to hear the sirens. If you're at a city park watching somebody play soccer or baseball and a storm is rolling in, most likely you're going to start hearing a siren dealing with a lightning prediction system taking place. We also encourage residents to make use of things such as apps on your telephone, weather apps, weather radios, turning on the TV, being aware of those type of things to make yourself informed so that you know what you need to do in the event that an emergency happens. Secondly is make or have a plan in place. So if you hear the tornado sirens, you're out mowing the lawn, what is your family's plan? Are they to come inside? Where will they go inside? We always encourage people to go to the lowest level of your home and into the middle area of that lowest level. If people are at different parts of town, what is your plan for communication? How would they communicate if their phones weren't working? Where would somebody meet in the event that your home caught fire? Things of that nature, just trying to think about what kind of plan that you would have. And last but not least is building a kit. Having a kit at home, water, flashlight, batteries, canned food, medicines that you might need, blankets. You never know when your power's going to go out. We're really, 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 really lucky. Primarily Dublin's served by AEP, but I believe there's another electric provider. They do a fantastic job in regards to getting power back on as quickly as they can. But what if it's going to be a day or two or three? Are you prepared to be able to handle and deal with that? Last but not least, and this isn't on the preparation, but these are things to consider when you're dealing with emergency management as a team effort, and that is consideration of others. Do you have somebody with special needs that are in your home? Do you know somebody who has special needs that's a neighbor? Do you have an elderly person at home? Do you have an elderly family member, an elderly neighbor? Start thinking about your family, your neighbors, even pets. What are your plans to help those folks and those things when it happens? So that's kind of my quick run through of this. I apologize if I droned on too long, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to you folks.
I have a question. Can Dana like override the governor? If the governor says like 20% people in restaurants, can he say like no in restaurants or 40% in restaurants?
The answer to that is no. Is that there is a hierarchy of things. Now, there are things in Ohio called home rule, that those things that aren't decided upon by state government, we have the right to institute ourselves. But my experience has been that Dana is going to follow the direction that both the governor as well as public health is going to give us from an instructional standpoint. But good question.
Thank you.
Hey, Tom.
Yeah.
First of all, I think I speak for all of us. Thanks for all of your services over the years through law enforcement and emergency management. This is a great town to live in and really feel protected. So appreciate that.
Thank you.
I always wondered, when you hear the siren, is that, you mentioned it's a warning. So do we ever have a siren that's a watch that says there may be a tornado? I always get confused when I get the sirens. I don't know what exactly it means. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Sure. The tornado siren is only going to be activated when there is a tornado warning or a tornado spotting, meaning that a certified spotter or a public safety person on duty has seen the tornado in a particular area. It's a map that we have that if it's within those boundaries of this particular map, we will activate the tornado siren. And that siren goes on for 3 minutes, then is silent for 7, on for 3, silent for 7, and will continue until the warning expires itself. The idea behind the siren is simply to alert people who are outside to get inside and then either turn on their television, radio, cell phone, computer, whatever thing that they have to gather further information to give them direction as to what to do. The problem is a lot of Dublin residents think that the tornado sirens are intended to be heard while they're inside. And that's not the case, not at all. Now, will I say the vast majority probably can? I'd say maybe. I mean, we have 30 tornado sirens in the city of Dublin, and that's quite a few. And we test them every Wednesday at noon, unless there's some type of weather event happening at that point in time. And we have people that go out and listen to them. We have an electronic system that monitors them to let us know if one is failing or not. And we're able to go out immediately and make repairs on those, because we maintain kind of a complete set of siren equipment over in our engineering and development area, so that we could replace, I want to say, up to 3 sirens almost immediately without even having to order anything. Another reason that we have 30 sirens is for overlap purposes. So in the event that something were to fail, the system is still going to be able to cover everybody outdoors in the area in the city of Dublin. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great. I always wonder also about that Wednesday voice that we hear. And is that ever used for anything? I mean, is it ever serious enough where that voice will actually give us some instruction, or is that just a...
It's there to give instruction. I will give you an example. We utilized that voice instruction a number of years ago at the Dublin Irish Festival when we had to evacuate the grounds due to a major storm coming in. So not only did we activate another audible siren to get people's attention, we then used the audible system through that siren to direct people where to go in regards for sheltering purposes. So it's used in a very specific, narrow type of instance. And the reason why we don't do that is that it can become difficult to hear unless you're near a siren itself. We're lucky that we have a siren that's smack dab in the middle of the grounds where the Dublin Irish Festival is. So it's easy to hear the audible when you're there. If you step outside your door, the audible may sound like Charlie Brown's teacher sometimes. For those of you that remember Charlie Brown and how she would talk, it becomes more difficult to hear. So we don't necessarily rely on it unless it's a specific special event.
Okay.
Now, some people do get confused with the lightning detection system that's on our major city parks. That is a totally different system, and it uses science to identify the potential for a lightning strike anywhere within, I believe it's 10 to 25 miles of the city of Dublin, so that sports teams, baseball, soccer being probably the most primary one, softball, to alert them that, hey, a storm with lightning is coming, so that they can vacate the fields with as much notice as possible. We don't wait to activate the siren until the storm is right on top of us. We try to activate the siren to give people advance notice. The same thing with the tornado siren, is that over the years, people have said, the siren goes off too much. And we've tried to identify a good geographic area for activation, because we want to give people the time that are outside necessary to get to shelter as quickly as possible. And if we shrink that activation, we take away that time from people, we put them at risk. So we think we found a pretty comfortable zone in regards to siren activation. We've been averaging, I think, over the last 5 years, anywhere between 1 to 3 activations a year. So it's not like something that goes off a lot. I've had the luxury of being in Dublin for 26 years. I can tell you 20 years ago, the siren system would activate anytime there was a tornado warning in Franklin County. So then we would be activating 10, 12, 14 times a year back then. And it would drive people crazy, because they would be out on the golf course where it's sunny and beautiful in Dublin, and down in Groveport, they'd be having terrible weather. And so the question is, why would we activate for that? So it's been probably 15 years ago that we really relooked at that and changed the whole way of doing business, and kind of started identifying this area that we now utilize for activation.
Thanks.
Tom, I have a question about the O'Shaughnessy Bridge.
Okay.
Is our participation in that related to the fact that we're part of the SWAT, the Northwest Corner SWAT organization?
Yes and no. I mean, that's part of it, but our participation with that is we're the first community that's going to be impacted if the dam fails. And interesting, 10 years ago when I took over this position, the federal government was then doing a major test at O'Shaughnessy Dam. And I brought up in a group of about 60 people that why wasn't the city of Dublin playing a more prominent role? And they're like, well, the dam's not in Dublin. I said, sure, let's take a look at the map. When the map fails, what's the first community that's impacted by it? And they were like, oh, that makes sense. So at that point in time, we started playing a significant role with it. The dam is monitored and maintained by Columbus Power and Water. So they have people that are on duty 24/7 that travel to all the dams throughout Central Ohio. There's not anybody there full time, but there's somebody always out and about and available. Well, we're in their contact list along with the Delaware County Sheriff's Office, Shawnee Hills Police Department, that if there are any reports of any type of damage or something suspicious occurring at the dam, we'll be contacted and we'll be one of the first responders to go up there if and when we're contacted to investigate as to what's taking place, so that if we feel like, holy smokes, this dam looks like it's going to break soon, that we can start taking the precautions that are necessary to alert those Dublin residents that are going to be impacted by it.
Does that ever happen?
No. That, knock on wood, as I'm knocking right now on my desk, that dam was built when they built things the right way, which is concrete and steel. It would have to be a very, very significant event for that dam to be impacted and have any type of risk to us. Now, we have had over the years when we've had tremendous rainfall where they'll do controlled releases of water into the Scioto River. Well, we'll see river elevation really kind of spike up, and certain homes that are along the State Route 257 Riverside Drive will start to see some water really kind of coming up into their yards. But again, because of Dublin's good planning, most homes along that river in Dublin aren't built right on top of the river. There's quite a bit of space in between, so as to prevent structural damage, things of that nature. But every once in a while, it gets pretty high through there. And there's actually a water gauge that if you go on our website under the emergency preparedness page, you can click on that will give you a live time letting you know the depth of the river in Dublin, it's probably a mile south of O'Shaughnessy Dam, to kind of give you an idea. So I'm always looking at that when we get heavy rains to see what the impact is for Dublin in regards to how the river's elevating and declining. But again, knock on wood, the way that everything's developed, even super heavy rains aren't going to have a huge impact on us. We'll have some high water on certain roadways. State Route 257 Riverside Drive has some high water spots on it. But shoot, even over off a post road near Kaufman also has some high water spots as well. So, there are places that we know traditionally happen, and our streets people are great about going out there and getting high water signs put up as quickly as possible.
What kind of relationship do we have with FEMA? Is it formal? We have like a continuous dialogue, or is it just on an as-needed basis?
To be honest with you, Steve, we don't have a direct relationship with FEMA. Okay. The way emergency management is set up is the City of Dublin reports to the Franklin County Emergency Management and Homeland Security Agency. That's who we contract to handle all of Dublin. So even though we have portions of Dublin that are in Union County and Delaware County, we are completely serviced by Franklin County EMA. Anything that we need in regards to both state or federal resources goes through a process where we would make that formal declaration to the county EMA. They would review it, determine if they have the resources to help us. If they don't, they have two different directions they can go. They can seek mutual aid from other places, or they can ask the state. If they ask the state, at that point in time, the state is really the organization that has key ties to FEMA. And then the state works directly with FEMA from that regard to determine whether or not any type of federal resources would be needed. Again, knock on wood, where Dublin is located and the type of hazards that we look at, I hope that we never have anything where we really need to bring in FEMA. It's not out of possibility, but knock on wood, I hope it doesn't ever have to happen.
Thank you.
Hey, Tom, I couldn't help but wonder about the invasive species that you listed there. Are you referring to like kudzu and honeysuckle and things, or
Yep,
something?
honeysuckle, the emerald ash borer,
Oh,
Japanese carp. Those are examples of invasive species. And honeysuckle and the emerald ash borer we've had in Dublin over the years, but we've done a lot of good mitigating efforts to eliminate and or reduce that. It doesn't mean that they don't maybe exist in certain spots, but we've gotten rid of most of that. We haven't seen any of the Japanese carp or anything like that. Those tend to be more lake fish.
yeah.
And
What I see is the kudzu. That stuff grows like a foot a day, and I don't know if it's on Dublin property or not. But when we're taking walks and things, we're looking around, going, "Man, it really covers a lot of the trees."
it does, and I don't know that it's been identified yet specifically as an invasive species. That's something I'll have to look at. But I know I'm familiar with what you're talking about. Yeah, it does grow very quickly.
Yeah, I had one last question, Tom, and that was, with all the things that you all do now, do you have like a wish list of other things that could be done if you had the budget to do it that you don't do because of not having the financing?
Probably the only thing from that regard, and I'm not complaining whatsoever, is our emergency operations center. We have 3 TVs set up down there for monitoring and a single computer that works off of that. We're looking at down the road when budget monies become available to kind of expand that emergency operations center. And part of that reason is lessons learned. So back in April of 2018, I believe it was, Grove City had a tornado touchdown in the neighborhood down there. And we reached out to those folks on lessons learned, and they said they couldn't have enough monitors going at once. They had 5 monitors, and that wasn't enough to track all of the different things going on in regards to messaging, direction, TV, media coverage, monitoring what resources that they had deployed, resources that they had ordered, things of that nature. So it's not anything expansive, and we're looking at doing that. It's just that, when the pandemic hit, some of our budgets kind of got reduced, so to speak. It's part of a direction for the city, which I think was a very smart direction because we did not know what the short and long-term impact to the city of Dublin would be with this pandemic event. So I think once we're kind of through and get ourselves through the pandemic, which a lot of people ask me, when are we going to get through it? And the answer is, I don't know. I've been telling people for quite a while back, probably starting in May, that we're looking probably into at least the midpoint of 2021 before we start seeing anything going back to something that we recognize as being normal. And it could be even longer than that. I mean, we've all heard about the vaccinations and when vaccinations are going to be available. And one of the preeminent people involved in that with the federal government today had said it may not be till spring of 2021 that vaccinations are going to be available for the general public. So, and that is a major step in regards to dealing with COVID-19 from that regard. So, but
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say we're blessed to be in the city of Dublin because we deal with emergency management so comprehensively, is that everybody knows it's part of their job. So I don't have a streets and utilities director going, oh, emergency management. I have somebody who's on top of it, ready to deal with things. And that goes all the way down to taxation. I mean, every single division and department in the city treats it seriously and is well prepared and well versed to respond when needed. And that makes my job as a coordinator very much easy because that's only part of my job. I didn't go back to my resume in the beginning, but I also handle all the crime analysis and criminal intelligence for the police department. So I deal a lot with that. And I also deal with strategic planning, both with the city and the police department. So I'm kind of a jack of all trades, master of none, so to speak, that I have 4 hats that I wear at any given time. And the emergency management hat happens to be the biggest one beginning back in March and continues to be with the pandemic that we're dealing with.
Hey, Tom, it's Elizabeth. I wanted to give you a big shout out. We live behind the big water tower at Avery Park. And so I can tell you every Wednesday, my dogs absolutely recognize when the tornado siren's going. Is coming because the lightning does that scary noise. But huge shout out for your team to keep those updated. And the kids all know the drill. If the tornado siren goes off, grab the dogs, grab your gear, get down to the basement, and get prepped. So so excellent work. And the Smart 911 site is amazing. So that is a fantastic gift. I don't think any of us, maybe some of you knew. I didn't know about it till now. So I think it's a wonderful opportunity to share that. And on the neighborhood next door, Dublin does a really good job of sharing information on that particular site too, with either events taking place or emergencies, if there's traffic, of course, with our major interstates. So just huge shout out to you, your team, and the city of Dublin for that. It's wonderful to live here.
Thank you. Yeah, I have to give a shout out to Jay Somerville, who's our Technical Services Bureau Commander, who runs our radio room, which monitors the sirens, as well as Jeannie Willis, who's one of our engineering managers that really kind of oversees the group that physically maintains them. So we all kind of work together as one big team, and again, they're great people to work with. So it makes it easy for me.
Hey Tom. Again, thanks for your presentation as well as your service all through the years.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I have 3 questions. Just may not be that much to answer it. The first on the list was you have a civil disturbance on Franklin County, but not in Dublin. So my assumption is, okay, we are safe. But the question is it on the past? The list prepared based on the past numbers, or especially what happened in this summer is concerning a little bit. And the second question is about the Amber Alert. Like a couple of weeks, I think last month or something, we got an alert like at 4 o'clock in the morning. Something happened in Chillicothe. I really like the alert. It's not like something the place limited. Like Chillicothe.
Amber Alert.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah, I got one of those too.
Right. And the third question is regarding zoo. We have a zoo nearby, right? We had happened like a Zanesville, incident happened not too long ago. So do we have any kind of management on those things? Thank you.
Yeah, let me answer the first one for you. Civil disorder. Have we had civil disorders in Dublin? Yes. Have they been disorders to the standpoint of where there's been rioting, damage, disorderly conduct? The answer to that is no, we've not. That is certainly that we're probably in 2021 going to update our hazard analysis and relook at all of those things again. And it's a very good point that we've had protests in Dublin, but knock on wood, the people that have come to protest in Dublin have been doing it legally and exercising their right to free speech. And we support that 100% for them. But that's certainly something that we will look at in regards to preparation. The city of Dublin has sent police officers down into Columbus during that rioting situation. We took more of a peripheral traffic control on the very outer edges of that. We weren't involved in the riot response whatsoever, but we were down there supporting Columbus Police Department through mutual aid to simply direct traffic to make sure that cars weren't coming into the area and being exposed to something they didn't want to be exposed to. Number 2, in regards to Amber Alert, that is run through the state of Ohio. We have nothing to do with that. So when that goes off, that isn't anything that I can control, sadly. That is through an alert system that the state of Ohio has with cell phone carriers. So those type of alerts that go out, and I know it stinks at 4 in.the morning because I get woke up to them too. But yeah, that's something outside of my control. If it came from us, I could tell you I can control it, but generally those 99.9% of the time don't come from us. They come from the state. And last but not least, the zoo. Yes, we have been in contact with the zoo over the years. I'll tell you a funny story. When I started as a police officer in 1994, my first night on night shift was the Muirfield area. And I had a habit as a police officer of parking my car, getting out on foot neighborhoods and walking those neighborhoods. And my first night, I get out, I park not far from probably the Riverside and Glick area, and I'm out on foot walking, and I hear a lion roar. And you can imagine what I felt like when I heard a lion roar. I got real panicky and got on the radio and said, can you start some cars up here? I hear a lion roaring. My sergeant at the time gets on the radio very nice and politely and says, yes, you're about a mile away from the zoo. You're going to hear lions roar and things like that. At that point, I wasn't that familiar with Dublin, so didn't really realize how close the zoo was. But yes, that's something that we have a good relationship with them because Delaware County Sheriff's Office has an excellent relationship with them. And through them, we're all interconnected to know that if something were to happen, we're going to be alerted very quickly. When they had, and I can't remember the name of the animal, but I know it was red and it looked like a raccoon. When that went missing, we had information that we put out to our staff and things in that regard to be on the lookout for that animal. Now, that animal did not pose any type of public safety harm to anybody, so it really wasn't pushed out as an alert, more as a kind of a lost and found type situation. But we've utilized the zoo staff on a number of occasions. You would be surprised at how many deer, the bucks with the antlers, get stuck in soccer nets in the city of Dublin. And to cut them out and get them free without getting somebody hurt sometimes requires some zoo personnel to come out and help us from that regard. Because we have resources, but we have limited resources. So we have utilized them and we have a good working relationship with them. That's a great call. All three great questions.
Thank you.
Thanks. Well, thank you.
Okay, well, yeah. Well, thank you, Tom. We really appreciate you attending our meeting today.
If you ever have any questions or need anything, feel free to reach out to me. Nick's got my contact information and I'm happy to share it and willing to answer any questions you might have.
Hey, Tom, are you like the entire department or is there some people in your group?
I'm sorry, Steve, you kind of broke up a little bit.
Are you the entire department or are there other people?
I am the entire department.
Okay, I was just curious.
Yeah, it's just me. And for emergency management items, I report directly to Dana. And for the police items, I report to the chief of police.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next topic is any future CSAC topics. Nick, this would probably be a good time if you want to just review the calendar and the log we added to the back, or you had added to the calendar.
Yeah. Did everyone, and you guys can just nod your heads yes or no, I can see y'all. Did everyone get a chance to take a look at the calendar schedule that I put together? It's pretty basic, straightforward. Thanks to Steve helping out with the addition of the chart there. I think that's a good addition. I just had them sort of as a running tally, so I think that the chart looks much better.
Looks good.
Okay, great. I did want to let everyone here on the commission know that in January, Doug McCullough, our Chief Information Officer, has agreed to come and present to the commission as well. So I know that Connected Dublin is something that many of you have asked questions about and are very interested in. So he's going to come and sort of give a good sort of overview and update on a lot of the projects that are happening here within the city. As far as specific projects that have been delegated either by staff or council, there hasn't been anything at this time. I think, City Council just passed their operating budget yesterday evening, so that's great news for everyone. And I know that sort of over the next month or so, they'll probably be reassessing and taking a look at their committee structure and their committee calendars and sort of figuring out what their schedule is going to look like here in 2021. And so I'm hopeful that, I know that I've made them aware and Dana has made them aware that, you all are available for, to take on another project after finishing up your last one. And that, so if there is something that they want delegated or they're looking to sort of hand off to the commission, I would think that would come about here in the next month or so. I'm doing some follow-up on my end, just with the list that you all have sort of provided me over the last few months. Obviously, if there are other areas of interest, please let me know, and I will continue to follow up with staff to see if there's some timing and some opportunity for them to come forward to the commission to get feedback on some of these areas. I know there's a lot of things sort of hanging out there, and I'm hopeful that the budget cycle getting passed, some of them will start to get moving here into the new year. So, Parks and Rec, I know that they're doing some work on their master plan and relooking their master plan and bringing that forward. So, there may be some opportunity with that. Obviously, with the Connected Dublin projects, if there's some opportunity to get some iterative feedback with some of those projects, that might be an opportunity as well. We'll see what Doug has to share with us in January. So I'll continue to sort of reach out to staff and see if there's some opportunity for them to bring forward some different projects and so forth to engage the commission. But if something does not come about within the next month or so, I think it would be perfectly appropriate to advance sort of this list that you all have provided me. I'll work with you all and with Steve as the chair to maybe put together a small little memo to advance to City Council to say, hey, the commission has been available to take on some additional projects here in 2021. Here are some areas of interest, and see if City Council sort of refers anything back as far as a specific project or not. I think that would make sense as far as a timeline. Would everyone be comfortable with that, or does anyone have any specific thoughts in regards to any of that? I know I just shared a bunch of information, so.
Well, sounds okay. I'm just curious if there's anybody on our commission has any additional initiatives they'd like to see added to the log.
Well, I just had I had one recently, but I think it fits under the Parks and Recreation relative to a suggestion. So, I would probably insert that in there when we get a chance to talk to them.
Okay. Absolutely.
I have actually a shout out from the standpoint of something the commission did look at is the composting project. Are you all familiar with that? Dublin's running a pilot for composting. It's run. Michael Darling is doing a great job, by the way. Tell him that, please, Nick. I go over about once every 2 weeks, and that place, they have to keep adding, I think, containers every week. That's how well this is being accepted. I hope they continue it, but a big shout out is tell them I think they're doing a great job. I think there are 600 families that are participating in this now. So last I heard. So it's really something that I know this group discussed from looking at the minutes from previous years. So whatever was passed through has really been taken to heart, and we're really on the way of getting a good compost program in place. So,
Hey, do you remind me what happens? I saw that it's really a capacity, but what actually happens there? Do people bring their compost to them, or?
Yeah, it's set up through Go Zero, and they have carts like garbage, your garbage containers. Only they're green, and they have them set. Where the city services building. If you pull into the city services building to the right as you come in, there's sort of like a little corral kind of thing where it looks like you're hiding the garbage, and then you really are hiding the garbage. And what you do is you use biodegradable bags, and you collect your table scraps and dead flowers and anything that's not coated in terms of like paper plates and things like that. I mean, it's a whole lot of stuff that you can actually recycle or put through this compost program. You can even put meats, fish, oils, all kinds of stuff. They take soiled pizza boxes. and you collect it and you deliver it, you drop it off at that site. And I think it's on Mondays, if I'm not mistaken. Go Zero comes and collects it, and then you start filling it up again. Those things are totally full when I go over there because I usually don't go over until weekend. And I know pickup is on Monday, but it's really. I'll be real curious at the end of 6 months to see how much stuff is diverted from the stream. Because I know myself, I don't generate that much stuff myself, but I'm dropping off, 2 or 3 bags every week or two. So, and it's taken a lot of stuff out of my garbage, just keeps going down and down and down because I recycle papers and now I'm recycling compost. It's like, I don't even need this, 60-gallon garbage container that I got as part of the pilot program initially. So, but it's really, call, if you want to call, Michael Darling is the guy who's in charge of it. And I'm not sure, Nick can probably remind me of what department it runs through. But all you have to do is call over there, and you don't need one of their containers. You can use any container you want as long as you're using biodegradable bags to collect the stuff. Literally, you just dump everything in there and then take it over whenever you feel like taking it over. And I usually do it once or twice a month, like once every week or two. When you drop it off, and then you just can continue doing it. I think it's a 6-month program right now. And I'm not sure, how does that mean, from the standpoint, Nick, you might know this, or maybe you can find out, how do they determine if it's successful? And if it's successful, are we going to really continue doing it? Because I think it's from my standpoint, seeing what I've seen and knowing that they had 500 free containers and they went through those, and now they have 100 more families that are using their own containers for this. So it would be really interesting to see how they're going to evaluate it and find out if it's going to actually become a real program instead of a pilot program. Do you have any idea, Nick?
Yeah, so I'll follow up with Michael and see sort of what sort of numbers they have on the program here specifically, because I'm obviously it would be an interest to the commission. He is a streets and operations administrator here in our public works department. He oversees all of our waste contracts. So this was a. I mean, obviously we've known that solid waste composting is of interest to the community. It's one of those things that a lot of people are very interested in engaging with. They want something, some sort of service to exist with the city. It's one of those things that on the city end, absolutely is something that we want to be able to provide to residents. It's one of those things that is very much a challenge when you get on the back end of it with who are the service providers in the area. And there aren't a ton. Go Zero is one of them. You have Innovative Organics who exist on more of the residential. Go Zero is actually primarily a commercial provider. But they will participate in some of these drop-off programs because they can just come once every couple of weeks and do a pickup. So to get more back to our program, it's just what would be referred to as a drop-off program. So you're either you were given a bucket until we ran out of buckets, and then but essentially you'll put the scraps in the compostable bag here within the bucket. The bucket that we provided is a nice sealable bucket so that the fumes and the smell is not supposed to permeate your immediate space. And then you bring that over to the service center, like Dee said, and you dump it out, and then you take it back home and fill it back up. And like she said, it's a 6-month pilot program. I know that Michael has some things in place to sort of evaluate the success of that program. We were able to get the funding from a grant program through SWACO, the Solid Waste
Authority.
Central
Solid Waste Authority of Central Ohio.
That's it. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, there's actually another food recycling. It's the compost exchange.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're at the Dublin Farmers Market. And then they're also, when the farmers market is done, then he's there every Saturday at Bridge Park for drop off. And then Mindy Carr, who used to be on CSAC, started a pilot program at Bailey Elementary, and then they expanded it to Brandon homeowners, and he does curbside pickup. So it's and that's doing fairly well, I guess, too. So there's a giant need for it, and it's very, very well received. So I do it. I take mine every Saturday. And Dee, you are right. I mean, it's incredible the amount of less trash we have.
I was just curious, for the biodegradable bags, is that something the city provides, or do we buy them somewhere?
And
You can buy them on Amazon.
yeah,
They're actually cheap, considering I think they're not very expensive. So
yeah, Steve, to answer the question too, I don't know that I don't believe that that's something that the city's been providing. I believe we provided the bucket, and just pointed folks in the right direction on how to sort of educated them on how to sort of progress through the program, how to do everything appropriately, what can and cannot go into the buckets and so forth. So,
the bucket came with a starter bag, and that was
Yep.
it.
They take coffee grounds,
Do they what? Yes.
coffee grounds.
Yes.
I can fill up with.
That's like, pounds a week, right? It's amazing how much it takes out of your trash. I was surprised. I didn't realize how much of what you throw away can actually be composted. You can compost paper towels as long as you haven't used cleaning agents and things on these things. Like if you use a paper towel to, I don't know, dry some blueberries or something and it's badly stained, you're not going to use that again. You can throw that in the compost. So it really reduces a whole lot of daily trash, garbage.
And indeed, to your point too, one of the things that I'm very interested in, and I've been in touch with Michael throughout sort of the launch of the program and so forth. And one of the things that I'm very interested in getting feedback from the folks who participate and from the folks that are sort of engaged in running the program is, I think that there are a lot of sort of myths and misunderstandings out there about composting programs, and specifically these drop-off programs. We saw it even before the program started. Folks didn't like the initial drop-off location that was selected. It was initially going to be in the overflow parking lot at the Dublin Community Rec Center because of the central location that it provided, and it's sort of removed from any immediate residential area. And some folks were very concerned that there's going to be all sorts of critters diving and going throughout there. It's going to smell awful. It's going to smell all the time. And a lot of these things, and these are things that we've heard from folks even before we did any sort of pilot composting programs as well, is they don't want to participate because they're concerned it's going to smell. Or they don't want it in their neighborhood because they think oh well, my neighbor will definitely want to do that and they're going to put it out at their curb and it's going to smell and I don't want to smell it. Or they're going to put it out overnight and raccoons are going to get it. We already have a skunk problem in our neighborhood. Can you imagine what it's going to be like once we start composting? And I think there are things out there that folks sort of have those concerns because they've heard it, or they just think of the idea that it's this open bucket of scraps, and what animal wouldn't want to dive in there and have a great time and a feast in there. So I think we've heard a lot of those comments in previous years when we've sort of brought up the idea of doing some pilots and some different things. So I'm very excited that Mindy took the initiative, and I know she had been very interested in doing this for a while, in launching and sort of rallying the folks in the Brandon neighborhood to do a pilot program with Ray Leard and Compost Exchange, and then it sort of just perfectly coincided with the city doing a drop-off program as well, which is something that we've seen other communities successfully employ as well. So we're really excited to get the feedback on how all of these things have gone. I mean, personally speaking, the great news is the grant that we got was pretty small. It's not if you do a drop-off program, it's not an incredibly, at least as far as I'm aware, an incredibly expensive thing to do. So, you know, I think if we see a lot of success with the program, we would look for every opportunity to replicate it and bring in maybe a permanent or semi-permanent program. But, you know, I'll let Michael sort of make those statements. I'll talk to him and see if maybe he could come give an update to the commission here in the next couple of months, or at the very least at the end of the pilot program, just to sort of share our findings and let the commission know how that's progressed, especially with many of yours, you know, significant role in providing support and analysis with our sustainability framework previously. So.
Okay, very good. Assuming there isn't anyone else have any future topics? If not, are there any other items of interest anybody would like to bring up at this time? No? Okay. Next question, we have our next meeting scheduled for December 8th. I saw on our calendar, we really have nothing, no presentations, and Nick's availability may be limited. And the question would be, do we want to take a hiatus in December and just meet in January? Any comment? No? Okay, thumbs up. Anybody want to meet for any reason? No? Okay, so therefore our next meeting will be January. I don't have my calendar in front of me, but I'm sure I could bring one up. So it'd be January, what, 12th? Does that sound right? Yeah.
January 12th, that sounds
Okay.
right. And if 3 of you want to meet, you know, in December, that won't be a quorum. So I think you would be fine if 3 of you wanted to hang out and get together just to see each other.
Okay.
Be a social meeting.
Exactly.
So we're going to pass up on our December meeting. We'll meet January 12th. If no one has any other further business, if I see anything on the screen, our meeting is now adjourned. I hope everyone stays healthy and safe until we meet again.
Hope you all have a wonderful holiday.
Thanks.
Me too. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, have a great
Much
holiday.
turkey.
Bye-bye.
See you next year.